You're listening to the LaRocque Life Podcast, where hosts Michael and Laura explore relationships, adventure, freedom, and just some all-around real and raw conversations, drawing from their 17 years together with a bit of sarcasm, humor, tears, a few and lots of love. They deep dive into the male and female perspective on relationships and navigate the highs and lows of life together. Sit back, grab your love mug, and let's get into today's conversation.
All right, babe. Making fun of me as usual, which it's usually warranted. But yeah, tonight's awesome. Special. Feel good.
Yeah, tonight we are having our first podcast guest. So we've been doing our podcast, I think a year now, right? About a year.
Dangerously close, yeah.
Yeah, because it was the beginning of COVID. And we're ready to bring on guests and offer value in ways that, we're not the pros on. So we're going to hop right into it today. And we have a special guest too. I think this is going to be I know this is going to be an awesome topic and hit for a lot of people because we're going to talk about money and relationships. But our guest has like a really awesome twist to it too, because she really empowers women and let's just bring her on and she can share because she has a really good way of sharing exactly what she does
100%.
And her passion behind it. And so let's bring on Lindsay Sparrow.
Deadly.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Lindsay. How are you?
Oh, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Podcast anniversary. I don't know how you celebrate that, but I'm like nervous. I'm your first guest. I have to do a really good job or at least entertain everybody a little bit. But thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
Yeah, good. We're glad that you reached out because I think this is such an important topic. And as we kind of discussed earlier, there's so much we can talk about today, but we'll just roll with it and see where it goes. But why don't you first just let us know and let our listeners know exactly who you are and what you do?
The good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay.
Give us all of it.
So my day job. So I'm an investment advisor. I've been a financial planner for 17 years. From an educational perspective, I have a master's in finance. I'm also a certified divorce financial analyst, which is a designation that nobody knows what it is. Quite popular in the US, but there's not very many of us in Canada. But basically, it's weird because I always say, "Oh, I love divorce," but no, I don't love divorce. It's just I like the work of what complexities that can bring to people's finances, and I like the side of relationships, and I myself have been divorced. So I just find everything to do with money, relationships, all very fascinating. On the personal side, what can I tell you? I'm happily remarried. What else? I love lattes because obviously I'm by the latte on social, so people can follow me there. I wish like there's going to come a day where my toughest choice is going to be, red or white wine, right? Like that's going to be like my big decision someday, every day. So, but I love surfing behind a boat, not surfing like in the waves, but
right.
Yeah. So what else can I tell you about myself? I'm a workaholic, self-proclaimed workaholic, and I actually grew up with Mike. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I guess that's a really key point that we didn't point out, right?
No, and we'll talk about it later too in moving on, but it's just for myself anyway, for guys, for anybody, for relationships, it's like it doesn't matter where you come from. And you'll learn more about Lindsay's story of just what a success you really are and how proud I am of you. Like we used to just be drinking buddies. We talk about it in the bush and stuff and just but I mean you're doing it and it's awesome. It's great to see people like that and like lift up from that, right? It can sometimes feel so down of our backgrounds and how we grew up and watching our parents' lives and those stories. And yeah, man, I was talking about it after our conversation the other night. It's like, I'm super proud of you. Like it's awesome. It's great to see. But yeah, it's a great mix too. I like this financial with relationships because it's so generally taboo, or I know in our life, like, I mean, our life's pretty open because I grew up poor farmer. So it's like Laura knows all about our money situations and we're part of it and it's what we do. But I know a lot of relationships, and you're going to speak to more of this, Lindsay. It can be such a people are so siloed almost, right?
Yeah, like I think money is still quite taboo. I think when we separate out women and men, I think it's still very taboo for even women to sit around with their girlfriends talking about money. But I think that we enter relationships potentially with very dysfunctional relationships with money. And we both come from, two people entering a relationship and they each have their own feelings around money and how they think it should play out, what they think should be priority. And well, we know like money is the number one reason for divorce. And so there's a lot there, right? But there's also a lot that I think couples can learn, and they can, it's never too late to figure out new money skills and like totally approach money differently. So that's what I hope that through all the shit we're going to talk about here, we can get to like the place where people feel like they're taking away some things and they can maybe rediscover the money conversation within their relationship and find like a healthier way to deal with it. Because money is extremely stressful. And if you're having money issues, that can actually feed into every aspect of your relationship, every aspect in your personal life. It can feed into your work life. Like there is no, you can't protect yourself from it when you're in it. And when have that extra anxiety, I just think it creates this monster of everything. And you try to solve money problems with trying to make more money. And then that creates more stress. And yeah, it's a fascinating topic.
It is such a fascinating topic. And you know what I find a lot of my clients have told me, and I've been here in my past as well, is that the more I just avoid looking at my bank account, and other women have told me this too, like if I just avoid it, it'll just either, go away, which is silly because that doesn't make any sense. Or, it'll just get better one day. It'll get better one day. And so I feel like that's kind of an aspect we take even to our relationships with any problem that we're facing in our life, right? A lot of us don't have that awareness to kind of hit it head on. And also if it's scary, then it's really easy to avoid it. So I don't know, do you have tips or just even a discussion around what if you're at that point and maybe you're the woman, maybe you're the couple and you're not really communicating about money and you're bringing these expectations, but you're not even talking. So I don't know what his expectation is. He doesn't know what my expectation is. And we're just kind of navigating life. What do you see, or do you have some tips for these people who are like, you know what, I don't really want to open that can of worms. So then they continue on struggling for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Whereas if they actually just faced it, they could probably shift things a lot faster than they think.
Yeah, so there's an interesting conversation there around avoidance. And we will do this with all sorts of aspects of our lives, right? If it's uncomfortable, let's just pretend it's not going on and avoid. Let's just put that, let's put that under the carpet with all of our other problems and hope that it just fixes itself over time. The challenge with money is it usually only gets worse. So like if you're avoiding dealing with your debt, you're making minimum payments, your debt just continues to rise. Online banking and credit cards has actually made it really easy for people to not ever have to look at their stuff, right? Like
yep.
We went from a cash world and then progressively just got into this electronic world. And now there's like cool apps like mint.com, so MINT, and that's where you can like load your credit cards, load your bank accounts, and it'll track everything and it'll tell you where you're spending your money. And most people like want to throw up when they do this, because you start to see really, and it's like it shocks everyone. Even people who think they know where their money goes, it shocks them. But the point of this is not to just make yourself feel worse about life. It's actually to kind of, it's all about self-awareness. If you start to identify where you're spending your money, then you can start to prioritize. And this is where I think the problem lies, is that if you don't know what you care about, if you don't know what your priorities are, how do you even funnel your money into the right places? Right. And there's a good conversation around keeping up with the Joneses, buying shit you don't need, or even want, or even care about. And I mean, I don't know how many times even myself, and I'm in finance, I go out, I buy something 2 days later, I haven't even taken the tags off of it. I don't even know why I bought it. I don't even like it that much. But there's a funny thing called dopamine that really controls so much of what we do. And I always think when I'm in the stores or online shopping, like, Lindsay, just be smarter than the dopamine. Can you do it? Right? But it gets us all right. And we use money and buying things as a way for like short-term gratification. And, I've worked with couples where, they're hiding what they bought from their spouse. So this is super common, where, they put it they get home, they park in the garage, they leave it in their trunk for a while, or they leave it in the garage for a while, and they slowly bring it in, take all the tag. Like, this is true. Like, people do this.
This feels like a movie.
It's like alcoholics hiding their booze. Like, it's kind of the same thing. But I guarantee you, there's someone listening right now that's going, "Oh my gosh, I do that." And again, that's that. And it's, it's not even that they might feel ashamed that they bought it, but they're also really concerned about how their spouse is going to react. So I would guess in that relationship, what's probably happening is that their spouse makes them feel really bad about shopping, makes them feel really bad about spending money. So I definitely have like different tips that couples can use. And I have my own philosophy on how couples should actually handle their money. I don't know if you want to jump right into that, but we can leave that for later if you want to.
Okay, hold on to that for a second, because I have a question based on what you said. So the people who are doing that, and to whatever level or degree that looks like, even buying, like, I'm just picturing myself buying a latte, but maybe like throwing that receipt out and just throwing that cup out before I get home. I don't think I actually do that, but I'm just trying to personalize this here. So,
don't incriminate yourself.
I'm not going to put myself on the spot.
Yeah.
But so in a situation like that, where do you think someone needs to put their focus on first, on that level of honesty in their relationship, or on money? Or do they both go hand in hand? Because there's obviously some deeper things going on there, right?
Yeah. Like,
it's not really about the money.
Yeah, like, I could almost guess that somebody that's like that in a relationship now might have seen their parents operate very dysfunctionally around money, but there's probably something that's like deep rooted somewhere that's causing someone. And I think that how the relationship started and how the communication around money kind of went down has just carried on. And then it just kept feeding into that behavior of feeling like you can't be honest. But I think, honesty, it'll set you free, man.
Right.
And I think that you just have to eventually just come clean with everything. And what's funny in relationships and spending is that couples are like, everyone's got their own bad habits. Like, there is no perfect person out there that doesn't spend money on something they shouldn't. And remember, it's all biased. So like, I might not like that my husband spends money on something, but it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means it's not something I care about or value. So for that reason, if I don't think it's important, it's obviously a waste of money, right?
Yeah.
And so that's how that goes back and forth. But this tit for tat in relationships, this, you spent this $10 and you went out for dinner, you went out for lunch, all that crap, that just like it creates this like resentment. And it might start off small, but it just builds and builds and builds to the point where you are doing things like lying about what you're spending money on, hiding stuff, hiding what you've purchased. or you have a separate bank account that your spouse doesn't know about, and there's money feeding into that. And that is extremely common. So I just think it's when people become more aware of what they're doing, if they try to figure out why they're doing it, they have a chance to kind of change the behavior.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. That's everything I base my coaching on. It's like awareness is always the first step. Then you can align with what you're looking for and then go out and embody it, right? So it's no different with the money. And I guess when you're out and you're going to go through that drive-through and buy the latte or buy whatever, then at least if you're aware of it, you can pause and be like, do I really need it? Or is this just a reaction that I'm used to, or a behavior I'm used to playing out, right? But there was something else you said too that I can speak personally on, because when I had a baby, and I would be really curious to see what you see with women, because you work with a lot of women, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I had a baby and I stopped making my own money for that time, because I've always been self-employed. So I took some time off just to be with Lennox and I wasn't making money. And that really was tough for me, which then trickled into our relationship. Mike didn't care. Like he was like, it's our money, right? But something in my head was just shifted because I was like, now I'm spending your money and I'm not contributing. So do you think like just different seasons of life also affect that and how it's showing up with people in relationship too around money?
Oh yeah. Well, you guys talk a lot about like masculine, feminine, and I think I think the roles that we think we should play or what we think we should be contributing to a relationship it's really complex when it comes down to who's paying the bills, who's bringing in the income, who's the breadwinner, right? I think typically quite difficult for a lot of men. I think it's getting better now, but when their spouse is making more money than they are, there's that whole feeling. I think women try to protect their husband, so they downplay their success. I've been guilty of this.
Mm-hmm.
And then or men try to find a different way, like if they're not bringing in financially, they're really trying to find a different way to bring that masculine energy to the relationship. But in the end, I think it's fair to say that women ain't making peanuts anymore, and
Right.
women are about to control 51% of all accumulated wealth in Canada. So it's about time we start looking at each other as partners in a relationship, because there's just no point in worrying about these old school roles anymore. Like we need to try to let that go, but that's hard to do because this is generations and generations in the making, right? Like we have so much unconscious bias within us that it's so difficult to just all of a sudden be like, okay, yeah, we're going to be partners, even though we might have seen a dynamic between our parents and grandparents that was not that way. So it's hard. Like, I think if we are really conscious, we feel that way, but then in our subconscious lives a different version of what we're living as a couple. And then that's where you get screwed, and that's where you start fighting and all of that. But
yeah, you're dealing with these surface level problems when really it's something a lot deeper, right?
yeah.
So do you have any tips for the guys then who may be listening? So if their women are the breadwinner or on the, the trajectory of becoming the breadwinner of the relationship, do you have tips for men that you've seen where they can kind of, because that is our jam, right? Like talking more about the masculinity and what do men need to do to support their wives or to, kind of give that up, get out of their self, get out of their ego kind of thing?
Yeah. Like, I think it's important for men to realize that women have a hard time being successful. Like it doesn't come naturally where we feel like it's acceptable to be successful, and that I think we're always apologizing for our success. We're always we're always trying to downplay our success. And there's got to come a time where, we can feel good about what we've accomplished and how hard we've worked. But as soon as, like, I can say this for sure, like when my husband actually says something to me, because words of affirmation is my like love language, right? So when he says something to me about he's proud of the success or he sees how hard I'm working, like that goes so far, like crazy. So like if we're talking about, enhancing your sex life, gentlemen, like this is how you do it.
Right.
It's really about, yeah. Like, and I think that embracing and because women, I think I honestly, like, this isn't about like a violin for women, but what I'm saying is that I think I do think we've had to work really hard. Like I would say, like I'm in the corporate world though. I'm in finance. That's 85% men. So I would say that I've spent a lot of time trying to prove myself. And there's been a lot of things that have happened where I feel like, it's knocked me down. I just kept going. And then I realized it was actually what made me successful. This, feeling like I'm getting knocked down and feeling like I've really got to like work that much harder. That was actually what drove me. But I don't know what else. I don't know what advice to really give men, because I mean, I personally don't look at, like, I wouldn't look at my spouse and go, oh, you make less than me, I'm better than you. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really know how how to help men with that one, but I just hope that they're proud and see it as this is a partnership. And realistically, like, women can't be successful without support of their spouse and vice versa, right? Like, it just doesn't happen. If you both support each other and work hard, then you'll be, 1 + 1 = 3 kind of thing. But I just don't think you can. And I mean, I'm a little different because I don't have kids. So, I'm sure I could end up getting some hate mail for making it seem like it's successful. But when you're raising kids and then you're both working and all that's going on, like, that's tough. That's a tough dynamic. And then I also understand and appreciate that when you're raising kids, no one knows where their money goes when they have kids, because it just goes somewhere because they have kids,
Yeah.
And then there's the daunting education, saving for education, right? And so I just think, I think it's tough for young families. Like, I just think it's already hard from a money perspective, and so many ways to, like, so many reasons to fight about money. And then you start a family and money's tight, and there's the stress of kids, and there's the still wanting to grow your careers and all of that. So it's a hard thing to work through.
Yeah.
No, 100%.
I hear that.
Yeah.
And I want to, as you're talking, I'm like, yeah, okay. So this is definitely intertwining a lot of what we do. And even with the feminine and the masculine, it's like women want to feel seen and heard, right? They want to be understood. And when he can, so for you men out there, when you can do exactly what Lindsay said, like, lift her up, praise her, like, show her that you see her, and then help out around the house too, right? Help out with the kids, help out with bedtime, unload the dishwasher. Like, these little things go a long way, because I think we were talking about this prior to this conversation that we're recording now about, women, the roles, the expected roles was like to stay home, to make the food, to take care of the kids. And it's almost like they're still expected to do that, but now they're also running businesses or having corporate jobs and, full-time gigs. So for the men, it's really like stepping up, and even communication, right? So big. What do you need? But also for her, what do you need? Because I think a lot of women, as you were saying before, like, we're not used to being in this. We want to downplay it. We want to, stay in this, keep our husbands happy. But at the same time, it's up to us to ask them for what we need from them as well, right? And then you were saying before about with the masculinity and not feeling, just not feeling very masculine anymore, right? But I think respect goes a long way for our men, right? Like, giving them a lot of respect, because respect and praise back and forth, right? Men want to be respected, women want to be praised. So it goes hand in hand. And I know that that's worked a lot for us in our relationship.
It is. And I bang on a lot about team, right? Team. And we're a team, relationships, a team. And that's why I've always been that way with money too. Like, in our relationship, it's like, fucking, the money's in the pot. Here we go. Like,
right.
We'll make it through, and we'll do whatever we got to do. Right. And
just survive,
not stashing money anywhere. And like, I won't feel bad when I fill my gun safe with a bunch of bullets that are way overpriced. But at the same time, it's just to do things like that. And it's funny when when guys think that, right? You got to be the man, you got to do these things. But now, men, like, you look over, they're sitting on the fucking couch playing video games. Like, what are you doing, man? Like, you're not being a man while you're out making money. And it's like, fuck, I just need a man in my life. I need some help. But it doesn't emasculate you or make you any less of a man than, doing the dishes, helping out where you can. And then, even this morning, like, especially if your wife's successful, like, I seen the tire was low. So fucking go get the jack out, take the tire to the tire shop, and get it fixed. Like, could be on your fucking Land Rover or something like that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But like, take the tire off, go get it fixed. Like, do shit like that. Like, it's just, you can still be a man. Like, I mean, it's so funny that, but I guess, again, that's your ego, and you feel like you're less than, right? When your wife's making more than you. But fuck, it's awesome, man. Like, it's a great thing. And just be that team, be part of the team, just be a productive member of that team. And it's only going to help everybody.
Yeah. I think too, if you're not feeling enough because your woman is doing great financially, I mean, that's just a great indication that you need to do some looking inwards, right? Like, there's some stuff you got to address. But you reminded me of why I was thinking respect, because Lindsay said too about, like, we're not always going to agree on our purchases, right? So Mike just hit that with the gun safe full of stuff. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, whatever. But I know that he loves that stuff. So I'm just like, yeah, babe, fill that gun case if that makes you happy. Because if you're happy, then that's our home's happier too, right? Like when we're both happy. So just that level of respect is kind of where I was going there. Okay, there's just like so much that, like, which way should we go with this? Do you have anything else you want to talk about in that regard?
No, I think you kind of hit it on the head. And again, I bang on a lot about team, and women are coming up, and you hit it with 51% of women are going to be running money in Canada in the next year, 2 years kind of thing.
Yeah,
or it is?
They say by 2026, women will control more than 50% of all accumulated wealth in Canada. And the same is true in the US. But it's happening in a massive way. And some of it is like wealth transfer. So from, older generations down. But a lot of it is starting to stem with, female entrepreneurs and starting businesses and, taking things a lot bigger than ever before. Right. So, I just think it's an exciting time for humans, right? Because this is a big step in the right direction, that everybody has an opportunity to be successful. And that goes back to, when we talk about our upbringing, and, I think about how poor my parents were, and the fact that, the fact that I can sit here today and talk about this stuff is like crazy, because, I remember being in high school thinking, do I even have a future? Like, because you come from a background where you've never really seen people, especially in a small town too. You don't get, there's not too many people that you're looking up to go, oh, I could do that. I could be that. I think in the city, there's a little bit more of that, but also in the city, I think you can get yourself into more trouble as well. Yeah. Right. But yeah, so it's kind of cool that you can, that I feel like everyone has a good opportunity. Right. And we want more of that. We want more people to feel like they, with a lot of hard work, they can really do it, and they can change. Like if they come from a line of poverty, they can get out of it. Like there's nothing saying that you have to repeat that cycle. Repeating that cycle will be what naturally, you'll have to keep fighting against that, because that's the natural, that's how you were raised, that's how you grew up, that's, you're internally you feel like that's your future, but no, you just have to fight against that and keep working.
Yeah. And I love that you're saying that. And I think you should share a little deeper of your story, because it is so powerful, and your pain is your biggest kind of drive, right? But also it's your biggest teacher. And you're speaking about that from a money standpoint. Mike and I speak about that from a relationship standpoint, because we were ending our relationship, right? But then that caused us to do a lot of this deeper inner work, and then learn a lot of relationship stuff, and learn to respect and love each other deeper. And now we get to go out and teach other people how to do that. And it's so freaking fulfilling to hear and get these messages from couples that are like, we never communicated like this before. Our children are seeing different things from us. And it's just like literally changing the future. And same for you, right? Like you totally changed your financial future based on where you came from. And that has to feel so good. But I think for people who are sitting here listening to this and thinking like, shit, I don't want to be held accountable for looking at my finances, and start being more aware of my behaviors around that, right? But I think if you can shift that mindset to, but what if I started doing that? Like I could be like Lindsay, or, I could be whatever, just start changing my story, right?
Yeah. So, when I started doing a lot of work around like your own relationship with money, I had to think about my own past. And that was, I could have probably been in a therapy session for 10 weeks. But I was going to start talking about relationship with money. And I thought, what the hell am I doing? I don't even know what my relationship with money is. I'm going to have to start, opening up those old money wounds from when I was young. But I tell this story sometimes when I'm doing speaking engagements, and I tell it in a really long way, and it makes people cry, and I do that on purpose. But the story is about when I was young. I was only about 6 years old, and I woke up very, very early in the morning, and I came out of my bedroom, and because there was a light on, and of course I'm Snoopy. So I go into the kitchen and discover my mom there, and she's rolling coins at the kitchen table. And I asked her what she was doing, and she, turned and put me on her lap, and she said, I'm trying to get enough money together so that, your sister, brother have, lunch for school. So I remember this like very, very vividly. And I feel like I spent my life kind of trying to figure out how do I not end up in that situation. And I think that's like, I think I was telling you guys, like math was like my worst subject in high school, and now here I am with a master's in finance. Like, I think I became obsessed with making sure I had a different future. And one of the ways to secure that was to just learn as much as I could about finance. And, but I can tell you for sure, I had no idea about any of this until only like 3 or 4 years ago, when I started like opening up this can of worms of my childhood and how things that happened when I was younger influenced me. And, but that's the only way. Like, you have to think about all those things, because then once you start to realize, okay, this is my dysfunction, or this is what's good and this is what's bad about it, then you can start to create something different for yourself. And if you have the bad habits and you have kids, they're picking up all your bad money habits too. So if not for yourself, for the future of your kids. And, it's funny how people avoid money, because there are studies that show the more hours you spend a week or a month on your finances, the more wealthy you actually are. So there's like a rule that says if you can spend at least an hour a week on your finances, 1 to 5 hours a week, you will have 30 times more money than someone who doesn't do that. So there's like some pretty crazy statistics. And when people think, well, what do you mean spend time on my finances? What does that even mean? That can be everything from like checking your online banking, so you're seeing where your money's going. That can be like paying your bills. That could be reading a money book. Being online, watching YouTube videos about money, like that's all encompassing. But the whole point is that you're spending time to educate yourself and to make yourself aware of where your money's going and what's happening. And that all in itself helps you to just all of a sudden, without even realizing it, you start to make different choices with your money, and you start to put money in different places. I'll tell you this other cool study they did where, when someone was, they did this study where when you went and signed into your online banking, they had this group of people. And before you signed in, right before it let you in, your children, a picture of your children would flash up. And they found people put way more money towards their kids' education and into their kids' accounts because they were seeing an image of their children before they got into their online banking. So you can create these tricks for yourself so that, before you go in and, another trick that I always say is get paid on the first, broke by the second. And what I mean by that is your money should be coming in to your bank account, and then everything around like your savings, you're supposed to pay yourself first. That's the rule. So money goes out into your investments. Now, not in a savings account making 0.5% in an investment that's going to average 5 to 8% long term. Okay. Let me just put that out there.
Throw this stuff in there. Yeah.
No more savings accounts. We're done with that. We're over the savings accounts. Okay. But yeah, so, but the idea is that, and same with your bills and how, like, however you're paid, your money comes in, your bills come out, your savings come out, and whatever's left, that's the money that, you and your spouse get to spend on whatever you want without making each other feel guilty. Because remember, your goals, what you're trying to accomplish, you're putting your money towards those things. That's done. Now you just have what's left and you spend it. And if there's nothing left and you're going into debt, well, that's a whole other conversation that you eventually have to try to figure your way out of.
Right. Okay. I really like that too, because then there is just like no guilt associated with whatever you want to do with that money, right? And whether you split it down the middle or whatever, however that works. But yeah, then there's no like hiding in your car and taking off the tags. I love that you brought up the children, because I'm really passionate about that too with relationship stuff. And again, I think it's really cool because we're sitting here like talking about the things that we're passionate about. But I mean, ironically, is it ironic, or is it just exactly as it's meant to be that we are shifting where we came from? And because I'm the same way, like my parents divorced when I was 3, and I was always like, I will never get a divorce. I will never get a divorce. But there was other things you were saying about like when you put your kids up and you tend to put more money into their education. I was thinking, yeah, well, where your focus goes, your energy flows, right? So of course that would make sense that you're thinking about your kids, you're going to put more money into that. But I know for myself, when I was thinking, I'm never getting a divorce, I was putting all of my focus on never getting a divorce, and I almost got a divorce, which wouldn't have been the end of the world, but we obviously wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. But when it comes to like money or debt, where do you put your focus in a more empowering, exciting way if you do just like clench up and have really negative feelings around it? Because otherwise you're going to just continue to grow that stuckness, right? That avoidance. Do you have any tips around that?
Money won't fix itself. I don't know how to, I don't really know what I can say, because I know how hard, like it's a terrible cycle. So like, the racking up the credit cards, paying them down, racking up the credit cards, paying them down. Like there's a reason why people like freeze their credit cards, like literally put them in water and freeze them in their
oh, they do that.
Oh, that still happens. Yeah, that didn't go away. Yeah, that didn't stop. That's still happening from time to time. But I think that it's you have to find a way to break the cycle, and that's why people freeze their credit cards or cut them up, is because they want to. They're in this dramatic place where they want to stop the cycle. But then a couple weeks go by and new credit cards come in the mail, and you repeat that cycle. But you have to find a new way. Like if you're not good with credit cards, you shouldn't have them. Like, right. And yes, I know everyone says, oh, well, I need a credit card to book a flight. Yeah. Okay. But that's, that doesn't mean that you would spend it on anything else if you have a credit card just to book flights. Right. But we can easily make up all sorts of excuses. Like we can justify anything, right? I can justify all sorts of crap that I think I need that's going to change my life. But in the end, if I end up not having any money to retire down the road, that's really going to suck in my 60s, 70s, 80s, and potentially 90s, right?
Yeah.
So there comes a time where you just have to look in the mirror and just start dealing with things, right? And that's why there are money coaches. And that's why, like, the same way you would have a coach for anything, there's, that's really why financial advisors and financial planners exist. And sometimes, yes, if you're in a kind of a bad situation, you may have to pay like a consulting fee to get good advice. But then if you can truly set yourself up on a new path, then it might be worth paying that consulting fee to get yourself out of the bad habits that you might have created.
Yeah, I guess because really, if you look at it from the perspective of how much money are you continuing to lose by going down that path versus investing a little bit of something into someone who can help you change that completely. But so I forgot to say when I was talking about the kid thing that one of my like biggest purposes is to change the generations, right? So to break the traumas from previous generations. And as you kind of touched on earlier, like creating all of this new stuff for our children. So I love that because that adds such an emotional touch to it. And I think a lot of moms specifically, not to discredit dads, but I think that hits a lot of moms and feelers, right? Because it's just like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, but you're talking about something cool though, because you're talking about like figuring out what you value and care about. Yeah. And that's the whole thing. Like I think people, buy boats that they never ever use. It's like, oh, I bought this boat and I went out once last year, right? Yeah. Oh, I bought a $70,000 RV and we went camping once, right? Yeah. There's a lot of this that goes on, and it's because we don't know what we really care about. We think we want something for whatever reason, but it's really not a good enough reason. So like people, I think that's the biggest thing. If I could say anything, if you can sit down and kind of figure out what you actually want. So like, what do you want for your kid's future? What do you want for your own future? What do you want in the short term? Would you prefer to, go on a really nice vacation once this whole pandemic crap is over? Or would you rather, buy a new car? Some people might decide to buy the new car, but guess what? If you buy the new car, you might not be able to do the vacation. And so figuring out what you value first and not caring what you think you should value, right? So I think this is very confusing because your best friend might really, really, really love boating, but you don't give a shit about boating. The point is that who cares if they get a boat and you don't, if it's not something you value? Be happy that they're fulfilling their dreams in the way they decide, but that has no bearing on how you should spend your money and what you should do with your life. And anyone that has anything negative to say, well, they shouldn't even be in your life anyways. You know what I mean? Like anyone that's going to judge you for how you are trying to save or what your priorities are, like screw off, right? And that's what I think more people need to kind of just think about and stop worrying so much about what other people are doing. But that's not easy. I mean, you're getting sold to, I think we see something like 10,000 commercials a day. So, I mean, you don't have much chance of being successful financially when you could buy something on Instagram every 10 seconds. Like it's a real challenge. You've got to be really you got to be pretty cutthroat with your money, and you got to really know what you want to do. Otherwise you'll just give in. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll give you one little tip. If you're buying something online, you're supposed to put it in your shopping cart and wait 24 hours.
I've heard that before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the next day, if you can still justify and it still makes sense, then you can buy it. But usually what happens is, I would say probably 80% of the time, you forget why you even put it in. You forget you even have something in your shopping cart. Yeah. That's also why they do the automated emails to remind you that there's something in your shopping cart.
Yeah, give you the 10% off, and then it's like, oh, here we go.
Oh, deal.
Oh, I have to buy it. You're like, come on, you're not going to get that 10%.
Can't afford not to.
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up, because I was just thinking about how, I mean, not only are you getting sold to all the time on Facebook and Instagram, but also then there is that comparison, right? Where so-and-so, like you're talking about, has the boat or these new pair of pants, or just all of these influencers and all of this different stuff. So I love that you pointed out the whole knowing your values and your priorities. And that's a conversation. Why are you laughing?
I love how we went from a boat to a pair of pants. Nice boat. Look at these fucking pants. Oh, look at my ass. Anyway, sorry.
Again, everyone is different.
100%.
Yeah. But yeah, that's I think like a very tangible thing that you can sit down and converse with your partner about, right? Like, what do first I value and prioritize, and then what do we value and prioritize, right?
Mm-hmm. That's what I talk to men a lot about too, and everybody should think that way. Like, don't fucking worry about what people think of you. Mm-hmm. All that matters is that team in your house. And that's what matters, right? Financially, or even like relationship wise, and being a man, like whatever that looks like for you. And if it works in your relationship, do that. Don't worry about fucking Joe down the street. He's doing his own thing, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's a big one. And you nailed that, Lindsay. That's bang on, because you see it all the time, especially in central Alberta, right? Like, you got to get the RV, you got to get the side-by-side, you got to get the skidoo, you got to get whatever else.
Yeah. And
most people can't. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I just can't help but say, we're talking about oil money here, and we haven't had oil money in this province for what is it, a good 7-8 years? And we're still wanting to spend money like we have oil money, right? But that's what that comes from, is that, I can work on the rigs and make $250,000 a year. And, those days have been gone for a while, but that's where that whole feeding frenzy came from. Yeah. This massive amount of income that people were making. And then they just had the money to buy all sorts of toys and stuff. And hey, nothing against, just because you decide to buy a side-by-side, I own one. It's so fun. But the point is like, if I can buy something like that, it's because I'm meeting all the other goals that I set out. And if I haven't been able to do that, if I've been able to put money towards my retirement, money towards this or that, or pay down debt or whatever needs to happen, then I shouldn't be buying the side-by-side. Or I should set, if I can do these things by this amount of time, then I get the side-by-side. But it can't just be so like willy-nilly that we just can buy ourselves like $20, $30, $50, $100,000 items, because you just get farther and farther behind. And what's really tough is, I work with a lot of people in their 50s that literally they would have to put away their entire salary to be able to retire by 65 or 70, because they made all these choices in their 20s, 30s, and 40s to not save a dime. The thing is, when you're young and you have the ability to, there's something called compound interest. And if you do this at a young age and you put away like $300 a month, $500 a month, you'll have $1 million by the time you're 50, 55. You'll have the money. So if as a couple you've done that separately, then you come together, we're talking about $2 million by the time you're 55, by making the choice to put a sliver of the money coming in away. And I know that's hard, because we want the short-term fun right now. We want the, we want all the stuff today. We don't want to wait. Like, 60, that's forever from now. But the point is that when it is very sad. I see it all the time where people just don't have enough money, and I have to break their hearts, because for some reason people think it takes $200,000 to retire. No. Add a few zeros to that number, and then you're getting in the ballpark of how much it takes. And I'm not trying to freak people out who are listening to this, but I'm kind of trying to freak people out that are listening to this, right? Because if you haven't started saving, or investing, you need to do it now. And don't feel like, I don't want people to feel bad about what they haven't done, because the past is the past. We can't get in our DeLorean and go back in time, right? And so we just have to accept what has been, but make a true conscious decision that we'll make changes to move forward, so that we're not, eating tuna in our retirement.
So a question for you based on that. If you have debt, should you still be putting, I think I'm going to assume, but I'm just going to put it out there as if I'm asking the question that I know nothing. If you have debt, should you still be investing? Or should you pay off your debt and then invest?
Yeah. So kind of a general rule is your expensive debt you have to get rid of. So like credit card debt at 17%, 21%, that's got to go. Mm-hmm. Anything over 10%, you should really try to get rid of as quickly as possible, or as your first priority. The problem is if you see yourself running into this cycle where I'm paying off my credit cards and I'm racking them up again, and you're doing that, then I have to say that sometimes maybe it's not such a bad idea to be putting some money into savings or investing and then still trying to pay your credit cards down. Because if for 5 years you go through that cycle, all that happens is you've got your credit card racked up again and you have nothing in your savings. And if you don't have an emergency fund, that's a problem, as we've found out during COVID. When we went into COVID and there was a lot of uncertainty, this is before government support started, we could have seen unemployment rates like at 60%, 70%, like really. And that's why the government had to really intervene. But at that time, people didn't have more than 1 week. So the average person didn't have more than 1 week in their bank account or emergency fund. So they would be able to survive 1 to 2 weeks until they would start going into debt start not being able to pay their bills. So that's a really scary place. And so emergency funds pretty critical. But yeah, if you can get rid of that expensive debt first, that's always the priority.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I really want to talk about money and happiness. Remember we were having this conversation about money and happiness?
Yeah, I totally think we should talk about that. And I also wanted to talk about prenups and postnups, because I think, because again, Mike and I and everyone, most people listening to this know we've been together since we were 17. So no,
17 years.
Oh, sorry, 17 years. Well, I was 18, you were 19. So we didn't have, big assets or big money in the bank. And it enthralls me. I think it's interesting to hear about prenups and postnups, and you work with that. And so I just think that would be something fun and juicy to talk about. But let's talk about money and happiness.
Okay, so we'll burn through money and happiness really, really quick. So I like to talk about this because I think we think we will solve money problems with more money. Mm-hmm. And that's just not the case. So I work with, doctors, lawyers, professionals that are making $1 million a year and don't have any idea where their money goes. So if you think that, if I could just make another $50,000 a year, my life will be solved. No, the reality is they just buy bigger houses, more expensive cars. So you're not going to solve money problems by making more money. That's just not actually what's going to happen, because whatever habits have kind of created this place where you feel tight with money now, it won't matter how much money you make, because you'll just kind of get yourself into that, next tight spot, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not doing anything to fix what's happening or how you operate with money. The other thing with money and happiness is I love this study. This was a study from probably 10 years ago, but it did a study where at different income levels, where did people peak in terms of happiness? And it was basically like between 80 and 100,000 people were at peak happiness. And actually, once they started getting over 120 to 150,000, their happiness declined. So I find this just really so interesting, because why does it start to decline once you make 150,000? What's that about? What's going on in that level? But again, we have to tack inflation on the last 10 years. So let's say that maybe now it's if you make 120,000, you're at max happiness, but if you're at 170, now you're declining. So I think that's really interesting too. So money really can't buy you happiness. There's a certain amount of money that I think people need to just, live and feel comfortable. But then over and above that, there's other things going on there, and money is not going to solve or make you happier.
Yeah, that's really cool. Such a neat analogy. Wasn't there at one time like a show on Netflix called Happy? Or was that on Gaia or something?
Yeah, no, there's a good documentary about that, and like some of the poorest people, right? We're so happy.
Like they did studies, and there was like some of the like the third world countries were the most happy because they literally had nothing, but they had everything they needed within their families, right? And that presence and that time. Yeah. So I think that that's really neat because as humans,
I was just gonna say, I think why can't we be happy and rich though? That's kind of cool.
Well, yeah, exactly. Exactly. But just narrowing it down again to the values, right? And it's like essentially that connection and time. And because again, too, I guess they don't have to put out a lot of money, so they don't have to spend a lot of time making money. Whereas I feel like over here, we either, things are more expensive, so we do have to work more. But then, of course, we're doing it to ourselves by wanting more things and thinking we need these things to make ourselves happy, and then racking up the debt and then needing to work. So very crazy cycle, right? That they don't even have an opportunity to hop into over there because they don't have credit cards and stuff like that, and commercials every 5 minutes. So it's like a whole different ball game, but that totally makes sense. I think that's a neat study for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And then this post-nup stuff, because I think you're talking, I'm going to have to sign one soon the way you're going.
I told Mike before we got on tonight, I was like, you're going to have to sign a post-nup soon. And he's like, I don't even know. You're not going to sign it, you said?
No.
What happens if he doesn't sign it?
Dramatic thing. I ain't signing shit.
What if he doesn't sign it? Let's talk about what it is first, because I didn't even know it was a thing.
A thing, yeah. So actually kind of similar to what you're saying, got together young, there were no assets at that time. So why would you get a prenup when there were no assets? What exactly are you signing off on? So a prenup is basically before you get married, you're determining, whose is what if something happens, if the relationship dissolves. So that's a prenup. That's before you actually, get married. What's becoming quite common now, aside from just prenups are becoming common especially for people in their 30s, because second marriages or people that are waiting to get into their 30s, they might already have a house with some equity, they might already have some assets, so they're getting into it saying, well, I want to make sure to protect what I built before we got together. So, fair enough. But the post-nup is something that is happening. That's when you're already married and somebody is making a lot more money, and or there could be maybe a substantial inheritance coming, or there's family money on the one side, or there's all sorts of different reasons why people get post-nups. But that's basically getting a contract after you're already married. And I think people are avoiding prenups because they don't want to have the awkward conversation.
Kills the romance.
That's what I was going to ask you. Like, what's the mindset, and even then that level of connect or disconnect when you bring up a prenup or a post-nup? Like, I don't know. I feel like I would feel weird if Mike suddenly was like, "Hey, babe, I want you to sign this."
I would do it like trying to trick me. I would do it like trying to trick you like an old high school thing. Can you just sign this report, but have it under another paper? Just need to sign this quick.
I think that's illegal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of trying to make prenups way less taboo. So that's why I, talk about all this all the time. And also I remember I have this divorce designation. So for me, I talk about this crap all the time. So it's very second nature to me, which is sort of weird. But, I actually think I think people kind of roll their eyes when I talk about this, but I actually think talking about prenups or looking at a prenup before you get married is actually a really good way to talk about the money. So, because if you have not really communicated very well about money before you get married, I'm really afraid for how that's going to look once you are married and have to start communicating about the money. But the prenup, basically, when you have to look at everything you have, all debts, all assets, and you start talking about putting this into a contract, even if you never actually do end up signing a prenup, it's actually a good thing to go through, because you're literally having to put absolutely everything on the table. And it doesn't have to be this thing where it's like, oh, obviously I'm asking you for a prenup because I think we're going to get divorced. Obviously, I don't think anybody's, spending $40,000-$50,000 on a wedding thinking they're going to get divorced right away.
Yeah.
But the reality is that that's why people are afraid to ask for them, because it seems as if some way they're not fully committed to the relationship. And I just don't see it that way at all. I think that if you just take statistics, 50% of people get divorced, unfortunately. And I think that number is going to climb post-COVID. But I think that protecting yourself and having that conversation about money is not a bad thing. And as for the post-nups, those are trickier conversations for sure. Those are the ones where it's like, even in a lot of ways, okay, we probably, because then it's like, oh, are you preparing to leave me? Is
right.
that why you want me to sign this? Right. So I think that's a trickier one. But it still happens. It's, and money aside, I think if you really do love each other, then you can figure that piece out, because there's got to be some legitimacy to why someone feels that maybe something like that should be signed, or at least I hope there is. Yeah. Otherwise, there might be some deeper rooted issues there.
100%. Fuck, you'd have to be a hell of a salesman to sell that to you. Like, I stuck it out these many years with your ass, and now your ass
supported you while you got rich.
Yeah, and now I got to do this. But yeah, no, it'd be interesting. Yeah,
I do really like your.
There is a negotiation on the other side. Don't forget. So let's say that is the case, and there's someone that has built a really big business, and now they're wanting their spouse to sign off on this postnup. If you're a good negotiator, you're making sure that you're getting a certain value of that company for what you put in, so there's going to be a feeling there where I think, it's going to feel right, where you're like, okay, I appreciate that, maybe, you've worked for this, or this is part of your family business, or whatever the case is. But at the same time, I'm not going to just say that I'm going to have nothing. Right. And I think that's really important for women to hear as well. Specifically women, because I don't think anybody should feel like that just because they didn't financially contribute to a relationship. Yeah. And this can be men or women, it doesn't mean that they're not entitled to certain things and certain assets, because we all know that if someone's at home taking care of everything while the other person is able to focus on building a business or just, working as an executive or whatever's happening there, they would never have been able to get to the level of success if they didn't have that other support. Right. So there is, in my opinion, a price tag to that.
Yeah.
And that is where the negotiation comes in. So don't just sign a postnup willy-nilly. Get some good financial, get some good legal advice and financial advice.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm not thinking about that. I'm just
I think I just sold you on it, actually.
I'm just like processing it all. I think it's really interesting. And I liked your shift on the prenup, because for sure my mindset coming into a prenup is like, well, like you said, that takes the romance out of it. And it's like, this is a contract, not like we're in love. Right. But the interesting thing about in love is in love wears off. And if you're not constantly conscious of that and fueling like your relationship, then you are going to end up in divorce. And so I love that you just shifted that for me, because it was like thinking that a prenup makes it weird and this is a contract. But if you don't have a prenup, you're probably there's a high likelihood that you'll end up getting a divorce anyways, because you're not addressing those patterns and those lack of communication around money in the beginning, right? And because money is the number one cause of divorce or reason for divorce, then like you just said, that conversation could literally save your relationship. Right. Mm-hmm. So that shifted something for me in that. Now the post one I'll have to sit on, because that's an interesting one, but I think it's just really cool. I'm glad we talked about that, because I think some other people are going to find that interesting too.
Good.
No, that's awesome. That is awesome. And especially with all the not just women, men too, but like with all the online businesses and MLMs and everything like that, like fuck, people are starting to make some big cash, right? And putting a lot of work into it. But I mean, and it's tough because we can see that a lot too, where it's like generally the male is not even being supportive of that until a bunch of money starts coming in. It's like, oh, now you're coming out of the woodworks. Like, go fuck yourself. Here's this, right? So it's it'd be interesting for sure, because there's a lot of women just smashing it right now, and it's awesome. It's good to see.
Yeah, that is really cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of like success that can happen on, on either side. But remember, like, if you don't just address, like, if you have a company and you feel like you are concerned about, something happening in the relationship and that person's going to take potentially 50% of your company, or you're going to have to try to figure out how to pay them out the 50% of what the company's worth. If you don't have that conversation, all that's going to happen is you're just going to get more and more resentful. So, avoiding that conversation isn't going to help either, because internally you're just going to keep like festering that.
Yeah.
And that's going to just like not help the relationship either. So you're better just to put it out on the table and say, like, listen, I worked really hard to build this company. I really feel like, although you have, I feel like you have rights to some of it. Is there a way that I can? So a lot of times with post-nups, it's protecting from now on. So it's saying, I'm willing to share everything with you up to this point, but everything from here on, I really feel like, this should be my business, right? So, or whatever the situation is. So that's really where some of that comes in, is someone saying you're not getting anything. Like there are rules around there are laws around matrimonial home and things like that to protect a really bad contract that was signed, right? There are certain things there to help protect. But yeah, it's fascinating how people try to or need to figure out. And remember, like, this goes with debt too. So when you're married, you split all assets and liabilities, regardless of whether you knew the debt existed, regardless of whether you agreed to buy something or not buy something. Like, it's seen as, this is the family assets and liabilities. And even if someone has an affair, guess what? Like, doesn't change the fact that the way the law sees it is that it's 50-50 if you don't have a prenup or a postnup.
Oh, okay. So your postnup could address that any money you spend on this credit card or that is in your name, should we not be together, is yours to take care of.
Yeah. Or there's situations of gambling addiction and different things like this where, and I think if you have a spouse that's really bad with money, there has to be some intervention there. And there has to be something done with that. And it doesn't mean that the relationship has to end, but there might need to be certain boundaries in place, like there is no joint account anymore. There's separate accounts for that reason. And the money is much more like controlled. That happens too. But it's not to say that a relationship has to just be over. It's not that at all. It's just, you have to find, I'm sure you guys talk about this all the time, but you have to find what works for you as a couple. Mm-hmm. And what works for one couple is not necessarily going to work for another couple when it comes down to money.
Yeah, totally. I love that. Who just popped into my head when you were saying that? Do you guys remember that? What's her name? Gail Von Hoxley or something? She had that TV show on.
Yeah, there's a couple of them.
Maybe TLC or something. I can't remember what her TV show was called, but she talked about marrying a money moron. And if you married a money moron, you needed to protect yourself. And I don't know why the money moron just stuck in my head, but when you were talking about that.
Is this your fucking backhanded way of calling me a moron? It's fair. Okay.
It must have subconsciously stuck in here for a reason.
That's fair.
Anyways, you talking about that just totally reminded me of her. I cannot remember what that show is called, but she went into people's homes and there was all of the money stuff brought up. I always thought that was kind of fun.
Do us part.
Oh, that's what it was. Yes. Yeah. And then there was different spin-offs on it, but yeah. Totally. Yeah. That's funny. Okay. Do you have anything else?
No, I like this. And I think there's going to be a lot more to this. And I really feel like we're getting a lot of value and there'll be a lot of questions off this. So we're definitely going to have to do a round 2, Lindsay, and just see where that goes and see where people's minds go with this. It's just such a complex thing and it goes on forever and ever. Right. And it seems to be the world we live in now is like, all you do is chase money. Whether it's good or bad, I suppose it's just that's what we do, right? That's all I got with it, really.
Yeah, and I mean, we discussed that we should talk more on relationship stuff tonight, but I mean, we didn't even talk about your wealth of knowledge in the areas of investments and what to do with your money and stuff like that, right? This is round 1 of just that foundational stuff within relationships and starting that conversation with your partner, right?
Yeah.
So we'll definitely have to have you on again and do this again, but can you tell everybody where they can find you or where they could reach out to you if they do want to learn more?
Yeah. So follow me on Instagram at By the Latte. Look me up on LinkedIn under Lindsay Sparrow. That's probably the best two places. Just DM me. I'm on Facebook, but kind of not on Facebook, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm on Facebook as much as everyone else is, aside from maybe people in their 50s and 60s. Yeah. So I'm not on there as often, but, and hey, no offense. Facebook was cool to me at one point too.
Yeah, I agree.
Like if you actually just want to get a hold of me really quickly, then that's where you can like send me a DM and I'm happy to chat. But I'm really anxious to hear what your viewers have to say and what questions come out of this, because that's really like, I think how we can go to round two is hearing what everyone was like found kind of interesting, or and hopefully just people feel, I don't want people, talking about money can be so negative and just so depressing. I'm well aware, but like there is a path forward always, and there are things that can be done, and maybe next time we can talk a little bit more about some tips and different things that people can try and actually implement. But I think this was a good start.
Yeah, we definitely did give some tips, or you definitely gave some tips. So I do love that, but I think we could dive deeper. So that is definitely a throw out there to you guys listening. Definitely shoot Lindsay some messages or shoot us a message to either your biggest takeaways or any questions, anything you'd like her to go deeper on. We can totally have her back again. But okay, Lindsay, there's one last question I want to ask you before we end, because we had talked about this before and I think it's super powerful. And I think that a lot of people need to hear this. So what was the biggest thing that changed your relationship with money?
What was the biggest thing that changed yes. We were talking about this.
Yeah. And I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah. So there was a time not too long ago where I, finally had the realization that I was worthy to have money, to make money. That, I never thought that I could be a millionaire. Like that wasn't something that I really thought would, and it just literally never entered my brain. It was just not something that I had considered. But then there was a switch where I actually went from feeling like I wasn't worthy to where, now I feel I am worthy. And I don't believe that I should just have financial success, that it should just be handed to me. I know that I obviously takes a lot of hard work and a lot of dedication. But I think the fact that I could actually imagine that I could be financially successful, or that I could have it differently, that I'm worthy, that changed it. I don't think I would even be close to where I am today if that did not like switch. I don't think I would even be anywhere near where I am now if I didn't at some point realize that, shit, this could happen for me. Like I could make this happen for myself. Cool. So yeah, that's what it was for me.
That's so cool. And I'm so glad that I decided to ask you that question and that you answered that, because it's so huge, like opening yourself up to that level of receiving, right? Because there's abundance out there for all of us, whether that is in the form of relationships or money, communication, like anything that we want, we can have it. But first we have to open ourselves up to it. And that's that whole level of worthiness and deservability. So I'm really glad that you shared that, because it's so powerful.
Yeah. Well, thanks you guys so much for having me. This was super cool. And I hope I lived up to your first guest.
Oh, of course. Of course. Thank you so much. We'll have to do this again, like we said.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Lindsay. Well, I love you.
I love you too.
I love you guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Find us on social media at LaRocque Life Podcast and online at LaRocqueLife.com. Ladies, find Laura on social media at Laura LaRocque and online at LauraLaRocque.com. Have a request for a show topic? We love that. Send us an email at michael@LaRocqueLife.com or DM at LaRocque Life Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review.